Hello and welcome to News On. I'm Miranda. We have a lot of news to get to, so let's get right to it. We begin today with Tropical Storm Sally. Sally may be losing steam, but that storm continues to be very dangerous for people all across Alabama and especially in the panhandle of Florida. There have been numerous water rescues, power outages, and widespread flooding. The storm also significantly damaged a section of Pensacola's newly built 3-mile bridge that connects the city to Gulf Breeze. The county sheriff there says thousands of people might have to continue to evacuate. The storm has also slowed down to about 5 miles per hour, which is very slow moving. That could dump up to 35 inches of rain or more in some areas. Joining us live now is Weather Nation's Ben McMillan, who has been on the ground covering this particular storm now for several days. Ben, what can you tell us?
Yeah, Miranda, good morning. Just past 11 a.m. local time here in Alabama. We continue to see the devastation caused by Hurricane Sally. We're in Foley, which is about 10 miles inland from Gulf Shores where this storm made landfall. And you can see damage still very prolific. An entire tree here, probably 100 years old, has fallen onto this house. We were speaking with Leroy, the resident. He's still living here, and he can't get in or out of his front door. And it's going to be a couple weeks before power comes back on. So the folks in this area are going to take a long time to recover.
It's just horrible to see. And I know they're saying rain continues to be a concern with all the flash flooding. As I mentioned, this has been a very slow moving storm causing lots of power outages. We saw some just horrific images in the panhandle of Florida. What are authorities telling you? How long could it take before power is restored to some of these areas?
At the earliest, Miranda, we're hearing this weekend. That's when they expect those spotty power sources to start to emerge. But as you know from visiting Louisiana, it's a several-week process. So some people might have power, but other areas might not. Eventually, by the end of the month, authorities hopefully get to everyone.
Ben McMillan, thank you so much for that live report. Always good to see you. And again, stay safe, our friend.
Thank you.
In other news, one of the Los Angeles County deputies injured in a shooting over the weekend is now out of the hospital. The sheriff for that county released that information, tweeting this: he has a long road ahead for recovery, but he is not alone. We, as he says, as a community are in this together. Of course, the brutal attack was caught on video, as you can see. You can see the gunman, as he walked just moments ago in dark clothing, walked up to their vehicle and just broad daylight fired into the passenger side of that window and then, as you saw again, ran away. Although investigators say they're following multiple leads, they haven't identified that suspect. The LA County Board of Supervisors was offering a $100,000 reward for information leading to his or her arrest, but that amount has now tripled thanks to donor contributions. Senator Ted Cruz says thanks, but no thanks. Just days after the Texas senator was included on President Trump's new short list of potential Supreme Court nominees, he told Fox News, well, it's not the desire of his heart, as he put it. The comments make Cruz the second of 3 now conservative Republican senators to deflect the high court buzz. Last week, the president shared his 20-name shortlist to fill a future vacancy if he gets a second term. Now, while Cruz says he isn't interested, Arkansas Senator Tom Cotton, also on that list, appears to be. He responded on social media saying that he will always heed the call of service to our nation. Did you know the Supreme Court hasn't heard a case in person since early March? Yeah, it's been that long, and it doesn't look like that's going to change any time soon. When the new term begins next month, the High Court says it will continue hearing oral arguments by phone because of the pandemic. Audio will be available to the public. No word yet on how November and December sessions will be conducted. Also making headlines, 7 international hackers now face charges in D.C. for a scheme that reportedly targeted people and companies worldwide. The suspects include 5 Chinese and 2 Malaysian nationals who have been slapped with racketeering, conspiracy, and other charges. Investigators say the suspects targeted more than 100 people and companies in the U.S. and abroad. They reportedly not only stole customer data, source codes, and other business information, but In a very unusual move, they also allegedly hacked some video game companies and sold its currency for profit. The 5 Chinese suspects are still at large and are believed to be in China. The 2 Malaysians are awaiting extradition here to the U.S. Prosecutors say that the hackers' targets included more than a dozen prominent universities, as well as a nonprofit in D.C. that fights global poverty. The president, again, on the campaign trail, this time making his way to Wisconsin, where he will hold yet another rally. To give you just a quick update, and we'll have a more in-depth one coming up later on the show. We now want to head out to Amanda Head and Ben Berkwan. Real quickly, guys, looking forward to your coverage tonight for the rally. Wisconsin, a key state there. A new poll is suggesting that Biden might actually be gaining ground. What are you guys hearing?
Yeah, so they have done polls in the last few months. Obviously, that's something that is frequently ongoing. The polls have tightened just a little bit, by just a little less than a point. But you have to remember that this time around in 2016, President Trump won this state by only 23,000 votes. Sounds like a relatively large number, but it was actually less than a point in this state. This county in particular, this is Marathon County. President Trump won this county handily by nearly 20 points. We've already got people lining up outside. It is very clear that President Trump has at least this county on lock.
Yeah, and I think with the law and order issues, with what we see going on in Kenosha, this is going to be one of those states that it really comes down to pivotal issues like that. If we continue to see the rioting and all of the unrest throughout the state, I think that bodes well for President Trump. And what we're seeing out here, the support for President Trump, I also think we have to discount the polls in general based on what we saw in 2016, Miranda.
Yeah, especially what we saw in 2016. I think only 2 got it right. Amanda, Ben, thank you so much for that live report. We look forward to hearing from you a little bit later on in the show. But still here on this edition of News On, peacemaker or deal breaker? What's next in line when it comes to foreign policy for the Trump administration? We're going to talk more about that. And mail-in voting continues to cause controversy. Our very own Jessica Rivera is going to join us live in Denver, Colorado. She's been covering this story extensively, and she's going to give us the very latest on the situation when it comes to that. Coming up, you are watching News On. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Welcome back to News On. As we mentioned right before the break with Amanda and Ben, that the president is on his way to Wisconsin, where he will hold another rally there tonight. That's supposed to begin at 8 o'clock. We'll, of course, have live coverage of that. Something that we might expect to hear from the president is this mentioning of a COVID vaccine. Little confusion today. His director said one thing, the president trying to clarify those remarks. Joining us now is Sophie Mann. She joins us from Just the News at our D.C. bureau. You've been covering this story extensively. Sophie, I want to get your reaction, but first I want the viewers to hear what the president had to say and exactly what the CDC director had to say. Let's take a listen. I'll get your reaction.
No, I think he made a mistake when he said that. It's just incorrect information. And I called him. And he didn't tell me that, and I think he got the message, maybe confused, maybe it was stated incorrectly. No, we're ready to go immediately as the vaccine is announced, and it could be announced in October, could be announced a little bit after October. But once we go, we're ready.
So there we just heard from the president, again, trying to clarify the CDC's director's remarks. If we could go to that soundbite, and this will kind of help explain some of the confusion, I would think.
Tell me when you think we'll have a vaccine, as best you can, ready to administer to the public, Dr. Redford.
Well, I think as Dr. Cadillac said, I think there will be vaccine that initially be available sometime between November and December, but very limited supply and will have to be prioritized. If you're asking me when is it going to be generally available to the American public so we can begin to take advantage of vaccine to get back to our regular life, I think we're probably looking at late second quarter, third quarter, 2021.
So, Sophie, why all the confusion here? Why are they seemingly out of sync, if you will?
Hi, Miranda. Yeah, I mean, as you say, we saw two sort of differing narratives presented yesterday by President Trump and CDC Director Dr. Robert Redfield. What we're looking at right now is sort of just a relative level of confusion, I think, when it comes to the question that Dr. Redfield was actually responding to yesterday, which the CDC has since offered clarifying remarks just to let the public know that Dr. Redfield was in fact trying to address when we do get a vaccine, will be widely disseminated among the public entirely, which is not necessarily the same question as when a vaccine will be available, in a safe and effective way at its inception point, which, as the president said, could be as early as mid-October. So I think there was just a little bit of a misunderstanding with the path of both questions directed at both gentlemen yesterday. But, the president said last night during his press conference he was going to put in a call to Dr. Redfield and sort of smooth things over. And so I think that this is maybe just a little bit more of a misunderstanding than an actual disagreement over vaccine timelines.
Yeah, it seems like we've seen quite a few of those, in all honesty, when it comes to especially Dr. Fauci as well. And that's something that his Democratic opponent has been very critical of, and trying to basically use that as saying that the president and his administration doesn't really have a grasp of COVID, making him almost look incompetent. Is that working, though, do you think? You're in D.C., you're on the grounds. Is that strategy working with independent voters?
That's a good question. I think to an extent it has had some traction insofar as certainly the coronavirus pandemic has been a challenge. It would have been a challenge for any administration. There have at times, as we know, been somewhat muddled messaging coming through from Dr. Fauci, from Dr. Redfield, from the CDC, from the president. But I think the public, as a general matter, seems to be responding positively to the idea of a vaccination sooner rather than later. Everybody wants to get back to regular life. And so if the president is promising, empty things, that I think will, of course, negatively impact him. But if there really is a vaccine ready to go in mid-October, in November, in December, that can be issued to frontline workers, to hospital workers, I think that undoubtedly that's something the public, including, of course, independent voters, would respond incredibly well to.
Sophie Mann with Just the News. Good to have you, as always.
Thank you.
So another story that continues to stir up controversy is whether or not people are going to vote via mail or in person. There's been lots of stories coming out all across the country, and Jessica Rivera, our own Jessica Rivera, joins us now at our Denver studios. You've been covering this story extensively. Just recently, we had some issues happening in New Jersey and North Carolina and in your own state of Colorado. Thanks so much for joining us here on News On. Good to see you.
Thank you, Miranda. Voting by mail is a huge controversy right now. And just yesterday, like you noted, in New Jersey, President Trump's campaign asked a federal judge to prevent election officials from actually counting mail-in ballots 10 days ahead of the election day. This is due to a lawsuit that has not yet been settled, having to do with voter fraud. The Trump campaign is also asking to ban mail-in ballots that are not postmarked from being accepted up to 2 days before the election day. Also yesterday in North Carolina, some voters actually received 2 identical ballots for the November election, in which election officials say was an error due to addressing an initial mistake. And in Colorado, the state of Colorado is suing the United States Postal Service over a possible confusing mailer.
The postcard contains 2 pieces of wrong election information for Colorado.
In the lawsuit, Colorado says the post office mailers are causing voters to believe they can't vote in the upcoming November election if they do not request a ballot. But Colorado is one of the states where voters automatically receive ballots in the mail. There's no request necessary. And if a Colorado voter does not mail in their ballot, they can still vote in person for the upcoming November election.
So what these lawsuits are about is actually asking a judge to tell the Postal Service to not send this postcard, which contains misinformation on elections, to Colorado voters.
And Miranda, the Colorado lawsuit has stopped any more of those mailers from going out, at least for now, until a judge can make a decision on the mailer's information. But as far as the president is concerned, he is suggesting that voters who receive a mail-in ballot should vote by mail and then also try and vote in person on election day, just to test out the integrity of the vote by mail system. Miranda, back to you.
The president received, because that's illegal to do, actually received a lot of controversy for those remarks there, kind of backpedaling a little bit, if you will. But I think a lot of experts out there that cover campaigns are concerned that we won't actually know the results after Election Day, who won, that it could take several weeks, some are even suggesting months. Jessica Rivera, thank you so much for that report. Good to have you. Also coming up, I think we lost her, but we'll have her back on again here on News On. We also asked you that question too. A lot of you have been responding to that. One of the things that we like to do here on Real America's Voice Now, as we're called, is to give you a real voice. So one of the things that we've been doing is asking various questions to let you be a part of the show. We hope it's engages you, if you will. And that's one of the questions we asked, is whether or not you plan to vote via mail or actually in person. We got a lot of responses, so much so we've had to carry it on to the next day. We're going to get to some of those in just a bit. But coming up, this country and the world just reeling over this accord that the president helped broker between the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, and Israel, something that presidents have been trying to do for decades. This president has been able to do. We're going to talk about that, and we're going to also talk with Matt Boyle. He is a reporter for Breitbart. He is going to talk to us. He had an exclusive sit-down interview with Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, and what he thinks is the reason behind so many of the successes when it comes to foreign policy, when it comes to the Trump administration. So we're going to get his reaction to that. Also, Kristen Wirtz is going to join us as well. We're going to talk about that, and also something that a previous Secretary of State said needed to happen in order to get that deal done, why he's kind of being put in the hot seat once again. We're going to get to all those stories and so much more coming up. You're watching News On. We'll be right back. And welcome back to News On. I'm Miranda Khan. As we mentioned, much of the country and the world just continuing to react to the president's recent accord that he just signed, that deal with United Arab Emirates, Israel, and Bahrain. Something that, as I mentioned, presidents have been trying to do for decades now. And it is just something that is continuing to get attention. A lot of people are curious how the president was able to broker this deal. Again, Jared Kushner, very instrumental in making this deal possible. Joining us now from Breitbart is Matt Boyle. You recently had the chance to have an exclusive sit-in, one-on-one, is what I meant to say, one-on-one interview with Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, and he told you what he thinks is behind the administration's successes when it comes to foreign policies, and in particular, deals like this one. What can you tell us?
Well, yeah, so I joined Secretary Pompeo on his trip to Doha, Qatar this past weekend, where he was meeting with the different delegations as part of the beginning of intra-Afghan peace talks. This is the next big push for peace. So we've seen now, of course, the Abraham Accords, where we've got the deals with UAE, United Arab Emirates, and Israel, as well as with Bahrain and Israel. We also see in Europe the Kosovo-Serbia deal play out. Now, the next big push for peace from the Trump administration is a push to end the war in Afghanistan. And so I joined, so last week, this past weekend, the day after the 19th anniversary of the September 11th terrorist attacks, historic talks took place in Doha, Qatar, which is right across the Persian Gulf from Afghanistan and Iran. And the secretary was there meeting with the different delegations from the Afghan government, the Republic, as well as the Taliban delegation, which the Taliban still has enormous control inside Afghanistan. And this follows a February 29th agreement between the United States and the Taliban to get to zero U.S. forces in Afghanistan by next spring. So Secretary Pompeo told me that we're on track to get to zero U.S. forces in Afghanistan by next spring. That's a goal from President Trump and this administration. And these intra-Afghan peace talks between the different sides are the next step in achieving that. The next step after that is, of course, a ceasefire between the various sides, and then a broader power sharing agreement between the Afghan government and the Taliban. The big picture here, though, is that, and this is what Secretary Pompeo told me in this interview. So I interviewed him on the plane ride on the way back to Washington. From we stopped in Cyprus as well on the way back, but on the flight back, just before we took off, I did a big interview with them. He says that all of this push for peace, all of these deals are connected, and they all stem from President Trump and the White House and the Trump administration recognizing that the Islamic Republic of Iran is the primary driver of instability and chaos throughout the Middle East. So that's so approaching the Middle East from a different perspective than the failed visions of establishment Republicans and Barack Obama and Joe Biden and all these other failed politicians, and just recognizing the reality on the ground, which is that the Islamic Republic of Iran is the real threat here. Shredding the failed Barack Obama, Joe Biden, JCPOA Iran deal, which sent all sorts of money over to Iran and didn't have any real checks or balances on the Islamic Republic of Iran with regard to nuclear power, has paved the way for the United States to get to these peace deals.
And Matt, I have to ask you, because you're mentioning Iran, there are recent reports here saying that the showdown is heating up, and the U.S. is going to declare UN sanctions as early as this weekend. What did the Secretary of State tell you?
Well, look, the pressure campaign is going to continue from the United States against the Islamic Republic of Iran, and we're going to continue to see these Arab states. There are several more. So obviously now we've seen UAE and Bahrain join Jordan and Egypt, which were 26 years ago that Jordan joined with Israel. But now UAE and Bahrain have joined in, and we're likely going to see several more Arab states join in with peace deals with Israel in normalization talks. As that happens, the pressure will continue on the Islamic Republic of Iran. The hope is that the Palestinians in Israel will come to the table and make some kind of a deal with the Israelis. But, their leadership is still holding out out and for hurting their people in the process. But the Iran problem is, so if we continue to recognize that they are the real problem here, the hope is that eventually their hand in this equation, in these negotiations, in the geopolitical power structure, is going to be so weakened that the Iranians are eventually going to try to cut a deal too, an actual deal, not a Barack Obama, Joe Biden, let's send them big pallets of cash deal, but a real deal with Iran that forces their hand and forces them to denuclearize and join the rest of the Western world. And that's the big picture goal here. And then again, as we're pushing for peace in Afghanistan, which is, geopolitically, if you look at a map, right to the right of Iran, north of the Persian Gulf, the hope is that Afghanistan will come into the big picture here as well. And we're seeing a lot of progress being made there. The Taliban has followed through on their commitments in the February 29th agreement. So the big picture here is...
So going back to that, because that sounds like a very ambitious deadline there to say that we're going to withdraw all forces from Afghanistan as early as next spring. A lot of people are concerned about that if you withdraw all those forces, that you're going to have a caliphate again, if you will. Is that over ambitious to think that can happen? Because no?
So what happened in the February 29th agreement is the Taliban agreed to stop targeting U.S. forces. They've done that. They haven't de-escalated violence as a whole in the country, but they haven't hurt Americans since they agreed to do it. They've actually followed through on their agreement on that part. They've also agreed to stop harboring al-Qaeda terrorists, and other terrorist organizations like ISIS, etc. So they are following through on their side of the agreement. If they continue to follow through on that, and then the Afghan government side does as well, the big picture here is, if you put all of these pieces together that the Secretary is talking about, again, peace in the Middle East used to be a punchline. Now it's a serious thing that is achievable thanks to the efforts of President Trump and his administration. So we are making real progress that, people like John Kerry, Joe Biden, Barack Obama, Susan Rice, all these people failed to achieve. There's actual real progress being made now, and huge steps in the right direction. And there are several more Arab countries that are likely to join these other two that have joined the original two, Egypt and Jordan.
Right. So you mentioned several other countries. We've been hearing this, that is kind of the strategy. Let's get a few, and then more will trickle in. And you mentioned Iran will eventually, hopefully, be postured in a way where it has no choice. And you mentioned Kerry. He's been criticized widely all across social media there for saying that a deal couldn't be reached unless Palestine was involved in that deal. Clearly, it wasn't. What are the next targets? Which countries are most likely to sign a peace deal? Did Secretary of State Mike Pompeo give you any inkling as to who's next in line?
Yeah, so the Secretary wasn't very clear about which countries are going to happen next, but he did say there are others that are actively negotiating right now with the United States and Israel and the other Arab countries that have joined in on this process. But there have been, U.S. officials have told me, there have been reports out there that some of the countries to watch are going to be places like Sudan, Oman, maybe Qatar, which Qatar was obviously hosting the inter-Afghan peace talk that we were at there in Doha, also right there along the Persian Gulf, very close to Bahrain and UAE. So there, and then, eventually maybe Saudi Arabia. So Saudi Arabia would be one of the big ones. But there are several other countries that are likely to join the process here as things develop here. And we know there's a lot of movement happening behind the scenes, and look for that to come in the coming days, weeks, and months ahead.
Matt Boyle, thank you so much. Again, that was an exclusive report that you can find on Breitbart. Thank you very much. Appreciate your time, sir. Hope to have you back on again. We're going to continue this discussion because a lot of international stories are making headlines today, as you just heard. The U.S. possibly imposing those sanctions once again on Iran, what impact that could have on these peace deals. Also, we're going to talk about Brexit. All that coming up, plus your voice. We asked you whether or not you thought the president deserved a Nobel Peace Prize for brokering that accord. We have a few more answers that we'd like to share with you because, after all, this is Real America's Voice. We'll be right back. You're watching News On.
had the chance to speak about the United States' principled refusal to allow the Islamic Republic of Iran to have access to weapons on October 19th, just a month from now. They remain the world's largest state sponsor of terrorism, and we don't believe that them being able to trade in weapons of war with impunity is remotely acceptable. We will return to the United Nations to reimpose sanctions so that the arms embargo will become permanent next week. We believe deeply that this is good for the peoples of all nations.
There you just heard from Secretary of State Mike Pompeo again, keeping a close watch on Iran. We're hearing reports that they plan to reimpose those sanctions on Iran. Again, the Trump administration pulling out of that Iran deal that was set up and orchestrated by the previous administration, Obama. Joining us now to talk about Iran and stories that are making headlines when it comes to international news is Kristen Wirtz. She is an international political expert. Yes. Good to have you back on the program today. So you just heard the Secretary of State. We were talking with Matt Boyle, who had that exclusive interview with him, talking about, getting troops out of Afghanistan as early as next spring, all of them, and then again targeting Iran once again. You've heard the president say over and over again, this is a bad deal, this is a bad deal. And we got a little glimpse, you were able to hear it, we got a little glimpse of the Trump administration's strategy when it comes to creating peace deals. You heard Matt say that he heard the Secretary of State tell him that the strategy is just get more and more of these countries on board, where Iran is so isolated that it has no choice but to come to the table and try to reach a deal. Do you think that's an effective strategy?
I think so. I do think that, as our foreign policy leader said yesterday, that it is important that we with the US have the same views of getting these sanctions to Iran. I think that it's really important. With Brexit as well, it's important to have a strong allyship between the US and England.
Right.
And I think that with these strategies, I think that, that Iran will have no choice to come to the table, and, it will hopefully push that forward with, them coming back to the UN in the next few days. And
yeah, we'll see what happens, because it could be coming in just a few days right now. So speaking of Brexit, you have both UK citizenship as well as United States citizenship. So who better to discuss this with? So, President Trump keeping a close watch on Brexit, but so is his opponent, Joe Biden, saying that we're watching carefully. How important is Brexit? What impact does that have on our relationship with the UK and just the impact overall on this country?
Well, I think it's really important in terms of the trade deals, because, depending on how the election does turn out, it's important to consider Biden, the potential of him being president and pulling out of the US trade deals with the UK, which will be detrimental to England and the US. We have such a strong allyship that I think it's important to try and keep that. A lot of people in the UK are really thinking that, when Biden said that if they don't really nurture the Northern Ireland border policies, a lot of the UK does kind of agree that with our relationship with Ireland, it is important with Brexit to keep those international laws that we signed with the EU strong regarding Ireland. So.
Yeah. Well, we'll definitely keep a watch for that. Kristen Wirtz, good to have you back.
Thank you for having me.
Always a pleasure.
Yes.
Still to come here on News On, the president makes his way again to the Cheesehead State, hoping to, take a slice away from his opponent. We'll get a live preview of what you can expect to hear from him with our own Amanda Head and Ben Berkwam. Also, how do you plan to vote this presidential election? That's the question we asked you. A look at what some of you had to say. You're watching News On. We'll be right back. we mentioned earlier, the president is on his way to Wisconsin, where he will hold another rally tonight. You want to keep it right here on Real America's Voice for live coverage. Joining us now on the ground, we have contributor Amanda Head and Ben Berkwam. Take it away, guys.
Hey, Miranda, thanks so much. Yes, so as you can see, we've got a big crowd of people behind us. The lines go back and back and back and back. And we all know that these polls, they tend to, waver back and forth. They vacillate like crazy. But here's one poll that I want to talk about. Miranda, I've discussed this on air. It's the Zogby poll. They're a polling institution. They put out a poll a couple months ago. I call it the Zeitgeist poll because what it tests is public sentiment regarding the results of the election, not who they're going to vote for, but who they think is going to win. And it has held firm at 51 for Donald Trump, 43 for Joe Biden. And that to me indicates a lack of enthusiasm for Joe Biden. And honestly, you can totally tell here.
So this is it, though, Amanda. It is enthusiasm. Who has the enthusiasm? Is it these guys or is it Biden?
USA! USA! USA!
I don't know. Rick, come here. Chaz, come here real quick, guys. You guys have been here waiting for 2 days. Why is it so important to you? Do you think Biden has any of the passion that you guys have?
No Biden supporter is going to sleep out for 2 days in a parking lot to see Joe Biden. It's not happening. I don't think it's happening, Ben.
We got semis for Trump. Chaz, what about you?
Let them go. Keep it here.
I don't think Biden stands a chance. Do you see any boat parades or car parades or anything like this? Where's his rallies at? Where are the people?
What about you guys? What do you think, President Trump or Biden? I got to tell you, Amanda, the enthusiasm, there's nothing like it out here. There is nothing like it.
We love Trump! We love Trump! We love Trump! We love Trump! We love Trump!
I think we get it. So again, the president's supposed to be speaking at 8 o'clock tonight. Is that correct? And 2 days? 2 days? The weather must be really good there.
Rick, 2 days. Yep.
That's
it's not bad. You think of Wisconsin, snow. Right now, it's beautiful. It's about 60 degrees, 70 degrees. Beautiful day,
gorgeous.
Sunny day. Beautiful dresses. I don't know who made this dress, but it's beautiful.
This dress was made from a woman in Berlin, Wisconsin. She sewed it in 5 days. She was in her room for 5 days nonstop sewing so I could have this for today.
I love it.
Is that fantastic or what?
It's beautiful. It's beautiful.
We are the nicest people here, and people will go to arm's length to help each other out in everything. We love and support this president. We love everything he stands for. Wisconsin is a huge state for guns, farmers, everything.
And they're saying the Nobel Peace Prize back there.
Nobel Peace Prize. We love it.
Yeah,
Nobel Peace Prize!
So we already got your voice right there. That's one of the questions we're going to be asking. We're running out of time, guys. I know you have a lot to do. We're going to have live coverage here on Real America's Voice with both of you coming up later tonight, 8 o'clock tonight. Thank you so much for your time. Coming up, as you heard, they are obviously in favor of the president winning a Nobel Peace Prize. We asked that same question to you. We also asked you whether or not you plan to vote in person or via mail when it comes to the presidential election. We're going to get to some of your answers coming up right after the break. You're watching News On.
4 more years! 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 4 more years!
And welcome back to News On. You were just looking at people that have been gathering as many as 2 days to hear the president speak tonight. He is going to be doing a rally in Wisconsin. That was a live look there. We have our team on the ground. We're going to give you live coverage, so be sure and keep it right here on Real America's Voice. When it comes to Real America's Voice, well, our goal here is to give you a voice. You can simply join our community platform, which you can find on our website at americasvoice.news, or you can reach out to us on social media. Just submit us your comment or question, and we may air it on this very program. We also like to see video as well. So a couple questions that are continuing to get a lot of your attention, and this question in particular is, we asked you, should the president win a Nobel Peace Prize? We're obviously referencing the Abraham Accords. Our first comment we received is from Mike Soper, who responded via LinkedIn. He said, no, his actions do not promote peace. I thought it was a joke at first. Thank you for your comment. Also weighing in is Richard. I hope I'm saying your name right. Anyway, I'll just say Richard. How's that? He responded to our question via LinkedIn as well, and he said, yes, he absolutely should. Peace is being achieved in the Middle East for the first time in years. He says no one else came close to accomplishing this. Thank you, Richard. And maybe you can let me know how to say your last name. Another question we asked that's garnering up a lot of responses, something we spoke about a little earlier with our very own Jessica Rivera, and that is this very hot button issue about mail-in voting. Recently, we asked you how you plan to vote during this presidential election, in person or by mail, and we asked why. So our first response comes from Ann C. She says she's voting in person and doesn't trust the mail-in. Thank you, Ann, for your comment. Our next reply is from Aaron Joyce, who weighed in on Instagram. Aaron says, in person, I don't trust the mail system for voting, and it's bound to be a show in the voter lines who's not always down for some entertainment. Aaron Joyce, thank you so much. Joining us from Florida. And finally, our last reply is from Angel Ray, who reached out to us on Cloud Hub. Angel says, I'm voting in person. I want my vote to count. And clearly, as you can see right there, I think she's voting for Trump. What do you think? Thank you, Angel, for your input. Appreciate it as always. And remember, you can always weigh in. As you saw, we're all over the place. We're on LinkedIn, we're on Facebook, we're on Parlay, Cloud Hub, Instagram, you name it, we're there, and Twitter, of course. And like I said, we have our very own social media platform. That's one of the things that makes us truly unique at Real America's Voice, and you can download or actually sign up for that by going to our website. And a reminder, always download our app. So, coming up next, real quickly, we mentioned this the other day. Remember we talked about Taco Bell introducing this wine, if you will. It's only available, though, in Canada. Well, other companies are following suit, and that includes Mountain Dew. Yeah, it's teaming up to create a new alcoholic beverage. Take a look. Dew Garita. Yeah, that should be quite interesting. It kind of seems like it should have been the other way, right? Shouldn't Dew Garita have gone with the Taco Bell thing? I'm just thinking that maybe that could have happened. Also, if we have this video, we had live coverage with Weather Nation's Ben McMillan, who joined us earlier. He's been covering what is now Tropical Storm Sally there in Alabama and also parts of Florida. And there was an interesting sight, something a little unexpected. Take a look. You see it? Yeah, that's a pretty big alligator that you're seeing right there. It's huge. In fact, I live in Florida and I see alligators all the time, but I'm going to tell you, that one is a big one. So interesting to see that. But again, for all the people that are watching us that are from Alabama, the Panhandle of Florida, our thoughts and prayers go out to you. Please be safe. We know there's a lot of flash flooding, and we'll continue to monitor that area as well. And be sure and keep it right here on Real America's Voice. We're going to have live coverage of the president's rally in Wisconsin. America's Voice Live is coming up next. Keep it right here. We'll see you tomorrow.
2020! Trump 2020! Trump 2020! Trump 2020!